A key problem facing event planners with respect to creating more sustainable events is a supply chain, and it's one that's often overlooked. And I'm here at the Sustainability Corner with Tom from Sedex to address this very issue. Now, Tom, first of all, tell us a bit about your business.
So Sedex, we were founded back in 2004 by a group of companies trying to look more at their supply chain and to try and understand how better they can capture data and really see what's going on. So working with the likes of people like Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, the cooperative, to try and drive a more collaborative approach to looking at the supply chains. And this is where obviously since then we've been looking more at the events industry and seen the huge crossover with different supply chains and the work that was taking place.
And has sustainability always been your focus, or you've just been looking at supply chains in general and helping to facilitate better supply, and sustainability is something that you've found to be very key?
Key has always been sustainability, but interestingly enough, there's a variety of ways in which people call sustainability. We now actually call it responsible sourcing, because we look at things like labour standards, health and safety, environment and corruption. And of course this is a wider topic area now, not purely just within the environmental space, but looking at all the responsibility elements within the supply chain. So that's our focus area.
And what have you been telling people at this year's show? I mean, as I said in my introduction, I think it's not an area that when planners are looking at sustainability and even social responsibility to a point, they overlook their supply chain. What key pointers can you give people who are watching this with respect to making sure that their suppliers are up to speed?
Good question, and very much often the supply chain is a massively overlooked element within the events industry. I think the key bit is looking across cross-industry collaboration. Events industry can often see themselves as really siloed and saying, we've never looked at this, but as soon as someone goes maybe one or two tiers down the supply chain, look at catering for example, that first tier supplier may not be involved in things, but the second tier supplier is probably supplying into the retail industry as well, and in which case they're already probably doing a whole bunch in this area already. So I think the key takeaway is for events to really realise they're not doing it by themselves. And there's a huge amount of cross-sector learnings within either electronics industry, and we're looking at free USB cards, looking at catering, you're looking at textiles with uniforms. There's a huge amount of cross-industry learnings that can take place.
And which key areas, are from a green and a socially responsible perspective should event organisers be looking for with respect to their suppliers?
Big question. That's the million-dollar question. I think the key bit is to first understand what is the greatest risk to that specific games or event, because depending on what you're buying, there may be a variety of different risks. If you're buying uniforms, you're looking at textiles, you may then look at the areas around Bangladesh and building safeties and things like that. Or it could be you could be looking at footballs made out in India. It really depends on what the key risks are to that event and what they're buying to define what are the biggest risks.
So it's really looking at all your suppliers, from catering, which is probably the most immediate one, to even where you're getting your promotional goods from, as you say, right down to the actual clothes you're wearing too. How does this impact on the cost of an event? Because a lot of people will think that it's actually going to ramp up the costs and will therefore have a knock-on effect to the clients.
Sure, I think that's very much the traditional approach with an ethical trade of it's a premium, this has been reinforced by a lot of certifications and the cost of that. It's completely not the case now. Because the thing is, if everybody's asking for information, a lot of the certifications and schemes and processes are already there. So when, let's say, if we use with catering, it's not going to cost you anything more because those suppliers down that supply chain have probably already got certification standards, questionnaires. They can just share with you at no extra cost whatsoever. So it's really around that, being aware that things are already taking place that can keep those costs down and not duplicate processes that are already in place.
And how can Sedex help event planners to actually make sense of all this, of this supply chain nightmare, really? How can you help them? How can you point them in the right direction? Do they come directly to you? What do they do?
It's very much around filtering the supply chain. Very much to my earlier point about saying, well, it could be child labour, it could be building safety, it could be any number of problems from any number of sectors. The idea is we work with an organisation's supply chain to identify what are the actual key risks. Is it in your catering supplier? Is it in your uniform supplier? Is it in your USB hubs or whatever it might be, your pens or uniforms? So we work with them to help identify those key risks and I guess filter out the rest and really focus on the key problems.
And eventually make sure that their supply chain is working with every other element of the business to create a sustainable event.
Completely. It's very much, you've got to do something with the data. Data only, I think the key area is really what you do with the information. You then need to take that away and say, well, okay, well, at next year's event or in our policy or whatever it might be, these are the key risks and this is how we're addressing it. So you've got to do something with the data yourself. You've got to interpret it and make your own minds up about what to do with it. But yeah, that's essential with taking it away and really seeing value in this.
Yeah, well, it's a great start, isn't it? Tom, thank you very much for talking to me.
Great to speak to you as well.